Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear.
And I'll tell you something else, too, is I cannot stand sissies.
You're going to talk about wrestling, that's redneck talk.
And guess what, fatso? I'm the world champion.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Dragon King Carl Classic Wrestling Audio Show at WrestlingObserver.com, Figure4Online.com, my website WhenItWasCool.com. We're on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Amazon Music, anywhere you would expect a major podcast to be. That's where we are, and we are produced and distributed by WhenItWasCool.com. And if you like hearing this content, want to hear more of it, want to keep this continuing, then I encourage you strongly to support us on Patreon at WhenItWasCool.com. Instant access to about 3,000 podcasts right then. You have just tuned in to what is usually my most listened to show of the year. It is the annual ballot for the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. This is the 2025 ballot. I've just received it in my email a couple days ago and have been poring over it, getting my thoughts together. I have been voting for the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame as long as Dave's been allowing votes. He included me in the historian category, and I'm very grateful to be there. I've written 3 books on the subject matter. My Omnibus Wrestling History series, available at Amazon. Ordered that off When It Was Cool. The most recent one, of course, being the Pioneer Era Omnibus. And this year I was going to try to put together a call to action for a pioneer wrestler. We've done this before. We, myself and Matt Farmer, who's a great historian in his own right, we lobbied and got Colonel James H. McLaughlin into the Observer Hall of Fame. And there have been others. One, I think, is really, after doing the book, I think it's important. He is considered is Professor Theobald Bauer. But that's one of the things I want to talk about this year on our discussion show. I've got a little bit of an advantage this year. This show is always so massive. It's always either twice the size or has to be split into 2 episodes. And this year, it's not necessary to do that because literally since last year, I have been covering those who have not yet been inducted into the Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. And if you want, you're curious about any particular person that we may not mention on this show, it's quite possibly I've done a show recently that looks at them. So if the Dragon King Carl archives are at WrestlingObserver.com. They're also at my website, WhenItWasCool.com. Go to the Dragon King Carl Wrestling Show under the podcast tabs, and you can go back and pick out whichever ones you want to listen to a case for or against. So we're not going to cover the same ground again, but we are going to mention a few. And this year, I got a little twist to it. I've got a few things. We're going to have some fun with this. As I said, my ballot, when I complete it, I will put it up. I will be doing a feature article about this. By the time you hear this show, there will be a feature article on When It Was Cool that you can look and you can examine for yourself and gather your own thoughts. If you want to see that, it will be there. And I will put together my own personal ballot. But this year, I decided to do a little twist, and we'll talk about it in a moment. But first off, one of the things I do want to discuss is the ballot process itself. I am going to send a letter to Dave, and whether this even garners a reply or not, I have no idea, but I thought I would present the case to him in that in the past, the pioneers of wrestling, those who were from the Frank Gotch era and back in time, have been added under special circumstances. They've been historic because the era just really wasn't researched until I literally wrote the book on the era, Dragon King Carl's Pioneer Era Pro Wrestling Omnibus, where I did almost 700 pages. I spent years digging through 1800s newspapers across the country to put together the most complete, the most information we have in one easy-to-follow timeline, along with lots of notes and explanations and narrative about the 1800s era. So with that in mind, I would like to suggest that the pioneers should no longer be special cases to write in about and try to get David. I think they should be added to the historical era group of candidates. And the reason I say that now is because since the Pioneer Era Omnibus came out, and there have been multiple books written just in the last couple of years about Ed Strangler Lewis and Backwards in Time, William Muldoon. There's a new book by Scott Beekman that's recently came out about him. There are several books. My book, I would like to say is sort of the cornerstone of the overview of the whole era and really in-depth, detailed stuff that's never been researched before. Not to mention, you've got YouTube videos and different independent wrestling commentators putting together stuff. There is not a lack of information out there anymore about the Pioneer Era of wrestling. So I think this should be added to the historical ballot part. I think Professor Theobald Bauer, Professor William Miller, and perhaps a few more I will suggest to him. And we'll talk more about this on the 1,000 Hours show. I should have a new episode of that out this coming Sunday at both Observer and When It Was Cool, where I will talk a little bit more about, hey, should we put these in, and who are good candidates to go on there. So there are several pioneers already in, so we don't want to double our ground. Now then, what I'd like to do right now in the first half of this show is to go over the actual ballot itself, and then we're going to spin a little gimmick on the second half of the show, and I'm going to do something really interesting that, to my knowledge, nobody else has done yet, and we'll see how it goes. But let's just say, and one more thing I do want to mention, and I'm reading this straight off the ballot email I got. It says, in addition, in following the lead of the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is the model here, we have a 15-year rule. The following candidates have been on the ballot since 2008. In baseball, this would be their last year of eligibility. Here in the Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, if they don't get at least 50% of the vote in this year's election, they will be removed from the ballot. If they're modern candidates, they can be brought back in the historical performers era in 2 years if it's been more than 30 years since their career as a Hall of Fame level performer is up. Now, I read that, and it's kind of, a little technical there. But the ballot, I discussed this in these standalone shows we've been doing. The ballot's getting too jammed up with people who are never, ever, ever going to garner enough votes to get in. You have to have 60% to get in. There are candidates who have been on the list forever who haven't quite reached the 15-year rule, who never garner above 20%. These folks, look, they're never going to get in. It's not like somebody's going to overturn some previously unknown idea or Hall of Fame criteria for a Sputnik Monroe or somebody like that, a Pampero Firpo. These are candidates qualified to be on the list, but honestly, they've garnered so low. Bob Armstrong's another one. The Mongolian Stomper's another one. They've garnered so low votes that to stick around 15 years with them is just, they're never going to get in. And I would like to see that 15-year rule actually amended to possibly 10 years, and that may be a little much, but it's something we should think about. There are segments of this ballot that are much easier to get through than before, but there are a few, including the non-performers, and I've been preaching on this for years. The non-performers has long had a log jam because for whatever reason, I've never gotten to the bottom of it. I've got an idea, but never to the bottom of it. People just don't want to vote for that category. I think there is a large percentage of Observer voters who literally only want to vote for wrestlers in this Hall of Fame, not accompanying business people and commentators and interviewers and things like that. To me personally, I think it's very important. I think it's like a special, to me, I think that perhaps that's what it should be. It should be a special award that's given maybe by Dave. Although if I leave it in Dave's hands, there are a few people that should be in there that are never going to get in. So maybe it should be continued to be voted on. But there's several people that are log jammed in there that this year, I think, honestly, I forget what the limit is. We'll look at it in a moment for non-wrestlers, but I think I'm going to vote my limit this year. I usually stay well under the limits because I only vote for the ones who, in my opinion, are the very cream of the crop. But there's far too many people in that non-wrestler category. So the historical performers era, and we're asked to vote for 6 people maximum, or 6 entries, because there are tag teams involved now, so not necessarily 6 people, but 6 candidates for entry. So this is generally the one I would be considered the most knowledgeable to vote in. And it's really, this is last year and this year's the year it kind of clicked over for me. Generally speaking, a lot of the people I still wanted to vote for, like the Bill Goldberg, Sergeant Slaughter, people like that, still remained in the modern era, the Von Erichs. And now they've all clicked over, most of them anyway, have clicked over to the historical category. So I think this is kind of the area I most should be focusing on. So your candidates right now are Ole Anderson, the Samoans, Bob Armstrong, the inexplicable, just absolutely, why are they still on the ballot? Why year after year do I have to make this same speech? Why year after year is nobody saying to Dave, what the hell, man? But the trio of Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, and J.J. Dillon, which is just, I don't even want to talk about this year. You literally have cut out, they won the tag team championships and were pushed as world tag team champions in the largest organization in the world, but I can't count that because J.J. Dillon wasn't with them. I can only count the couple years they were with J.J. Dillon. It just doesn't make sense. Honestly, I don't even consider it as a vote. It just doesn't. There is no logical criteria why we only have to consider part of Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson's career, except for the fact they're trying to jam J.J. Dillon in there. J.J. Dillon should stand on his own merits. If he's one of the all-time great managers and people, and certainly he's a very well-liked figure, certainly a very important business figure, and perhaps should be considered to be in the Non-Performers Hall of Fame. But just trying to jam him in here, pigtail him off somebody else, I don't like it. It just reeks. I can't stand the idea of it. Who else on this entire ballot are we told to literally choose, 60% of their career? Forget the time they were in the WWF. That's just ludicrous. British Bulldogs, surprisingly, are in here. Look, the British Bulldogs are one the Observer fan base voting lot here has really surprised me on. I thought they would be number one with a bullet because they got so much positive press back in the day. The Observer was so pro Dynamite Kid. Dynamite Kid's considered, this, and he's in as a single, but now they're trying to, put Bulldog in there with him as well, and I suppose it's a consideration. He certainly has more merit than does J.J. Dillon, but Dynamite Kid's already in there, so it brings up the whole Rock and Roll Express argument, which I've talked for many years. I think it's ludicrous that that's even an argument. Let's put half a tag team act in there just because we don't like the other half of the tag team. It just makes no sense. June Byers is on that part. Wild Bull Curry, who's never going to get in. Junkyard Dog, who's often been borderline. Cowboy Bob Ellis, who was found out he had passed away some time back. Junkyard Dog's always borderline. Pampero Firpo, Black Gordman, and Great Goliath. Mongolian Stompers, never getting in, but he's on there. Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. Sputnik Monroe, at times he's been close. The Outlaws, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch. And, longevity's a problem with them, but influence certainly isn't. Iron Sheik, probably not going to get in. Sweet Daddy Siki, the tag team of Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood. Tag team of Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon. And the trio of Kevin, Kerry, and David's often hotly debated as well. The modern era performers has now clicked over really to this is the category I'm probably going to cease voting in probably next year, because there's still a few that are hanging in there that's kind of in my study zone, and so I want to keep those in mind. But Mark and Jay Briscoe is a team. Edge, Adam Copeland's in there. Bill Dundee. FTR, that's Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler. New, very popular, old school, throwback, retro kind of tag team. They're eligible. Bill Goldberg still in there. And I'm going to look at Goldberg this year again. Samoa Joe, Matt and Jeff Hardy deserve another look as well. Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, Mercedes Moné / Sasha Banks, John Moxley, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall as a tag team. Randy Orton perpetually on the ballot and perpetually a borderline pick. CM Punk, who's been on there a while, and look, the case for CM Punk continues to get stronger and stronger. Let's just be honest there. Cody Rhodes, making I think this is his debut on the ballot. Seth Rollins, Sabu, who passed away recently, Trish Stratus, and also the tag team of Rick and Scott Steiner, who, in my opinion, otherwise should be in, if not for some people disagreeing with sort of the politics and some of the things said by Rick Steiner a few years ago, and I'll leave that up to each. We'll talk a little bit about the morality clause and if there should be one, and if you should consider morality as part of your vote or just on their athletic accomplishment. We'll discuss that in the Patreon overrun for the show. So if you're a Patreon supporter when it was cool, we'll go about 20 minutes after this show and we'll discuss the morality clause, which I think is an interesting concept. Now, your candidates from Japan, the a little more manageable now, few tag teams, but most of the no-brainers are already in there. The tag team of Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Yoshiaki Fujiwara. Hayabusa's been on there for a long time. Masaki Motozuki, Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi. Zack Sabre Jr., I was shocked to see his name on there. I thought he was a very young man, but I guess he's now meets the criteria, which is, look, it's long been one of my complaints. I know it's been one of the complaints of some of the other historians as well, is that, look, people are getting into the Observer less than halfway through, Hall of Fame less than halfway through their career. 30 years old is too young. Too young. I have long advocated for 40 years old should be the beginning. But Dave's, this is, I think, one of his stand fast principles. He had an idea one time. He wants people to vote on people contemporary, where they see them in action. They can compare them in real time against other people. And that's reasonable logic, to be sure. But I think in terms of a Hall of Fame, which is supposed to be a career retrospective, and how did you do in the totality of your career, it's just too young. I mean, there are people who are going to be less than halfway through their career when they're eligible for the Hall of Fame, and I just don't think in any other sport is it that way. Not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is it that way. There's no other real analog to this, so that's something to look at for sure. Now, I followed wrestling in the Mexico category. I used to vote in this pretty regularly, but I've abstained for a few years because of largely fallen out of researching Mexican wrestling history. But make no mistake, I love Lucha Libre. I love historical Lucha Libre. And there are still a few viable contenders on there, Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner Dr. Wagner Sr., Sangre Chicana, El Dandy, Doral Dixon, Gran Hamada, the Los Infernos trio of El Satanico, Perita Morgan, and MS1, Elio Del Santo and Octagon, La Parca, the AAA version, Mascarita Sagrada, and Volador Jr. Then you have your Australia, rest of the world category. This was the old Carlos Colon. This is the let's create a category to get Carlos Colon in the Hall of Fame category. Really, the UK is the primary one, although I'm not above branching out into other places. There have been traditionally hot spots for pro wrestling and Lucha Libre worldwide that have never been covered in the U.S. much. Not in Observer, not in Torch, not in any of the magazines, not really followed by the fan base here. Argentina is one place that had a tremendous Lucha Libre scene for a long, long time. Brazil as well. There's been wrestling historically in Africa since literally the pioneer era. I touched on some African pioneer era wrestling in my book. So this is the other, so this is the ones you're going to have to really research, okay? I generally don't vote in this category unless there's someone who I just happen to have expertise on and can look at. But we have Spiros Arion, Dominic DiNucci, George Gordienko, Steve Gray, Billy Joyce, Les Kellett, Killer Carl Cox, Gilbert Leduc, Ted Boy Marino, the Royal brothers, Burt Royal and Vic Faulkner, Adrian Street, Jose Torres, and Otto Vons. And presumably I presume you're supposed to consider their international careers with a little more weight than their U.S. careers. For instance, Adrian Street, who wrestled, and also Spiros Arion, wrestling in the U.S. quite a bit, Killer Carl Cox. Yet they would not, come close to making the ballot, in the U.S. or whatever. So they're put over here, and maybe that's so. I mean, these are all certainly people that should be considered. There's nobody really on that list that I think is just ridiculous. They should be on there. Finally, the non-wrestler category, and this is the biggest one currently. We are allowed 7 votes maximum. Dave Brown, commentator, of course, best known for Memphis. Zane Bresloff, a U.S. promoter, most well-known with WCW, I believe. Bobby Bruns for his work in Japan. Bob Caudle, U.S. Commentator. Joe Higuchi from Japan. Jim Johnston, of course, he's famous behind the entrance music, especially back in the 1980s. Larry Matisick, who run the St. Louis promotion there for a while. He wrote some books as well, commentator also. James Melby, a journalist. Bill Mercer, longtime voice of world-class wrestling. Gorilla Monsoon, of course, we know him. Rossi Ogawa from Japan. Reggie Parks, and this would be for his belt making, and I think that's appropriate to consider that, especially as much of a sub-genre as pro wrestling belt collecting's become over the years. Morris Siegel, Tony Schiavone, George Scott, Kevin Sullivan, this would be as a booker. Mike Tenay, Ted Turner's always interesting. Jesse Ventura, no idea how Jesse Ventura's not gotten in yet for his commentary work. I will be voting for him in that category. Another one I will certainly be voting for is Roy Welch, promoter. And Roy Welch was added, I think, back last year. Didn't get much vote, didn't get much response. There's a lot of, I think, animosity and negativity toward the Welch-Fuller family. They've always been kind of separated from the rest of the wrestling world. They've always shied away from publicity from national sources. They didn't want magazines covering them. Newsletters seldom covered them. Honest to goodness, besides Ron Fuller himself, and I don't know that I don't outrank him on this, very few people, besides myself, Bo James, Aaron Gartland, who does the Southeastern Championship Wrestling Action News podcast at my website, which is when it was cool. Besides us, not a lot of people talk about Southeastern Continental. And so by proxy, the forerunners to that, your Buddy Fullers, your Roy Welches, and so forth, get left out of the conversation as well. Stanley Weston, still not in. Grand Wizard, and boy, you listen to that name under 2025, that makes one impression. Back in the day, he was a quirky manager, I think a Canadian manager, worked at WWF for a while. And then Koichi Yashizawa from Japan, and that's your fairly bloated U.S. non-wrestler docket there. Now we're going to take our mid-show break, and when we come back, since you've heard me talk about these candidates over some time, instead of rehashing the same ground, I thought we'd turn to technology. Yes, I have written up a heck of a prompt along with the Observer Ballot, and we're going to ask ChatGPT. Yes, we're going to get our AI overlords, the future rulers of mankind, perhaps the Antichrist himself, I don't know, but we're going to get ChatGPT to interpret the ballot, and specifically I have asked it to only glean from statistical information that's out there, such as win-loss records, studies that's been done. Combine that with the general chatter that might be available to it, any articles written, knowledge it may have acquired about these individual careers. And what I would have asked it to do is create for me, in its, does computers have an opinion? Or is it just facts skewed one way or the other. I don't know, but we're going to find out. We're going to let ChatGPT file its observer ballot. And it's actually quite interesting what it came up with. Now, I will not be voting for these same people. I will be making my own ballot. I'm not going to cast an AI ballot. If Dave wants to do that, by all means, here you go. It'll be posted as you hear this at whenitwascool.com. Download and enjoy. I don't know, but these will not be necessarily my votes, but I thought it had some interesting insight. And we'll take a look at that right after this.
Whenitwascool.com is your source for the best in retro pop culture. When It Was Cool features articles and podcasts on retro TV and movies, toys, action figures, pro wrestling, food, video games, and more. Hit the Patreon button to support us and get instant access to hundreds of premium podcasts and features. Family friendly and fun. Whenitwascool.com.
You may be saying to yourself, Carl, I already have a subscription to WrestlingObserver.com. Why should I support When It Was Cool? Well, thank you for supporting WrestlingObserver.com. They have carried my show for well over a decade, probably closing in on 2 decades now, and I thank you for that. But we're similar but very different also. Besides the multiple pro wrestling history shows I do every single week at When It Was Cool, we also have a couple other shows. We have Aaron Gartland's Southeastern Championship Wrestling Action News podcast, where he covers the history of Southeastern Championship Wrestling and Continental Wrestling. He, as a matter of fact, is an attorney from Dothan, Alabama, and he has a very impressive collection of memorabilia, and so he's all in on that territory in that era, has spoken to many of these folks before, and his insight's really, really good. So that show comes out every Wednesday at whenitwascool.com. Then on Fridays, as has been the case for a long time, in fact, sometime early next year, he should hit 500 shows. That is Eric Darcy's excellent Wrestling with the Dog podcast that airs every Friday at whenitwascool.com. So be sure to check those out. We have a new show almost every single day at When It Was Cool. So what did our future rulers of the universe, artificial intelligence, have to say? So with the ChatGPT, created a prompt trying to steer it away from kayfabe and stupidity and more instead toward factual analysis. I've spent considerable time with a prompt to get really, what it was aiming for is Major League Baseball, which this Hall of Fame's designed after, is a game of statistics. It's pretty darn easy to figure out a Hall of Famer for Major League Baseball. You crunch their numbers, and here are the best players in the game. Same thing can be done for football as well, basketball, so on and so forth. It's in fields of subjectivity, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, what you could do is you could say, well, people that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are going to be the people who have sold the most albums, records, singles, Billboard statistics, and you could come up with something. In fact, I've done a 100 greatest rock and roll artist at When It Was Cool, a article about that, which I crunched just statistical information on several years ago. But with subjectivity to wrestling, subjectivity to music and movies, those are individual. I mean, great art to you may not be great art to me. Great art to you, you may think of a work of art, be it music or art, painting or anything like that, and it may be life-changing to you, and I may get nothing out of it. And so there's the subjectivity that's hard sometimes to quantify. And I think you can do that. There are people who certainly, if you enter into the conversation influence, which is part of the ballot, the ballot says itself up in there, these performers should be considered for their influence. And so there's some people that obviously have been super influential, yet for whatever reason, they don't get many votes. I could make the case that, there are maybe 5 or 6 people on this very ballot who are, quote, not considered good wrestlers. They're the Robert Gibsons of the bunch or the Ultimate Warriors of the bunch or whatever, despite the fact they were immensely influential. Rock and Roll Express, question maybe besides the Road Warriors, has there ever been a more influential tag team in terms of people who every territory had some version of a Rock and Roll Express or Road Warriors, and that went on for many, many, many years. There's probably people still working regularly today who learned how to sell from Ricky Morton, and that's great. That's one of the best ones you could do. There are probably monsters today who studied the films of the Road Warriors as well. They should. So let's get into this. Let's just get into this and see what. I'm not going to try to explain how ChatGPT, quote, thinks, but I used my prompts wisely, and this is what it came out with, and fairly interesting. Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame 2025. And again, I put this up as you can read this in its entirety at whenitwascool.com, plus, access the free version of this podcast as well. Historical Performers Era. And I also think it's interesting that ChatGPT chose to use all of its available votes in each category. If it was limited to 6, it used 6. If it was limited to 3, it used 3, and so on. So it completely filled its ballot. So let's see what it says. Let's start with the Historical Performers Era. This would be my era. ChatGPT selected these, and I will tell you, I already disagree with it on one inclusion on there. I have voted for the Steiner brothers. I think the Steiner brothers, regardless, if you take, and again, we'll talk about morality, and we'll talk about whether that should affect your vote in the Patreon part of this show. But for now, let's just talk about actual in-ring performance and stuff. In the late 1980s through the early to mid-1990s, there was not a more dominant tag team on the planet than the Steiner brothers. They had tremendous success in WCW, in WWF, in Japan as well. What's not their, what is not their, what's holding them out of the Hall of Fame? Really, it seems nothing other than this morality situation with Rick Steiner. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But I certainly put the Steiner brothers in this session. ChatGPT disagrees with me. It says its selections are number 1. And I actually kind of presume these are in order of how they perceive their importance. And that's just what I inferred. Number 1, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, the Texas Outlaws. Both were influential figures. Dusty is one of the greatest promo men and bookers in history. Murdoch is an elite worker. Their combined and individual significance across the NWA, WWF, and Japan makes them clear choices. And I will say right now, you hypocrites, Pharisees listening out there, whatever, if you vote for the Steiner brothers, if you won't vote for the Steiner brothers, DON''T, you do not vote for the Steiner brothers, and you vote for Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, you might need to do some more research. That's all I got to say about that. If you can live with yourself, make yourself happy. Number 2, the Hart Foundation. This one's always kind of baffled me a little bit. It sounds to me, it just feels to me, I should say, feels to me like the Hart Foundation's one of those, and the British Bulldogs seem like they're such an obvious choice. Let's hear all the arguments against them. And most of the time it involves how long they were around. But tag teams you should expect would be around less amount of time than your others because they split up and go single, the exceptions being like the Road Warriors and Rock and Roll Express. But most of these other teams, the single component of their career was the more important one. But as a tag team, they should also be considered because it's a separate act. Again, I've compared this often to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is another subjective Hall of Fame. And you have people in there, both as a solo artist, Stevie Nicks and Phil Collins and Ozzy Osbourne, but yet they're also in the Hall of Fame as part of a act. Fleetwood Mac, Genesis, Black Sabbath. And now somebody could stand up and go, Bill Ward, he's just not a Hall of Fame drummer or whatever. And it's such a stupid argument. It's part of they were a Hall of Fame act with Bill Ward as the drummer. They were a Hall of Fame act with Robert Gibson as a partner. They are a Hall of Fame act with Jim Neidhart as a partner. If you put Neil Peart in Black Sabbath, it don't work. And Neil Peart is probably number one of number one. It's Neil Peart and John Bonham, your two greatest drummers. You just choose the order you want to put them in, and either's fine. But you put him in Fleetwood Mac, and it's horrible. There's no way he works that style good. Does that mean he's not a Hall of Famer? No. Does that mean Fleetwood Mac's not a Hall of Fame band? No. It means these are different acts, and that act got over that degree. So I don't understand why people find that so hard to understand. Hart Foundation. Bret Hart's individual resume already stands as Hall of Fame worthy. He is, of course, in the Hall of Fame. The team with Neidhart is one of the most remembered tag acts of the 1980s WWF boom. So says ChatGPT. British Bulldogs, along the same line, their influence on modern athletic tag team wrestling cannot be overstated. Dynamite Kid's work inspired generations globally, especially in Japan and Europe. Number 4, they suggest in this, all the top 4 are tag teams, by the way. Number 4, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, and this is a team I did not vote for. They're clearly a major tag team in one area alone, Mid-Atlantic. Ricky Steamboat already in the Hall of Fame as well he should be. So we're haggling over the act of Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood here, and again, they were a one territory big team. Now, they were one of the best ones in there, and if there's a Mid-Atlantic Wrestling Hall of Fame or NWA Tag Team Hall of Fame, they're in, no question. But in the overall encompassing Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, I disagree with this choice by ChatGPT. Rick Steamboat, Jay Youngblood, not on my ballot, but he says huge regional drawing team in the Carolinas with exceptional in-ring work. Steamboat alone is among the greatest baby faces of all time. Now, number 5, and this will please many of you out there and may have actually pushed me a little further toward Junkyard Dog. Yes, Junkyard Dog is often very much debated in these conversations, but ChatGPT likes Junkyard Dog as a candidate. It's a key draw in Mid-South, particularly among African-American fans. His popularity and cultural importance were massive regionally and historically. Number 6, the Von Erichs, Kevin, Kerry, and David. The Von Erichs defined an entire territory. World-class championship wrestling became pop culture icons in Texas and Japan. And, the Von Erichs, scope of the Von Erichs did reach outside just one territory, although they are most known for world-class. Kerry especially. David, big star in Japan. Well, Kerry and Kevin also stars in Japan as well. So there you go. Now, I like this. ChatGPT gave me some just missed ones that just fell below the criteria. Just missed. Ole Anderson is part of the Anderson lineage, and the Iron Sheik, a major pop culture figure, but borderline on sustained main event drawing power. That's the two that they said just missed making their criteria. So any of the others mentioned on this ballot, ChatGPT, it wasn't strong enough on them. The Samoans, Bob Armstrong, Blanchard, Anderson, and Dillon, June Byers, Bull Curry, Bob Ellis, Firpo, Gordman and Goliath, Mongolian Stomper, Sputnik Monroe, Sweet Daddy Siki, the Vashons. They did not make the top 6 for ChatGPT, nor even the runners-up. Japan, maximum of 3. And this one is got a tag team leading it as well. Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada, pioneers in women's wrestling. Toyota is arguably the greatest female in-ring performer ever, and her All Japan women work remains legendary. Number 2, Yoshiaki Fujiwara, a foundational worker in shoot-style wrestling, influencing generations and bridging traditional pro wrestling with MMA realism. So that's an interesting vote there. Finally, another tag team, Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan. And I've told you before, I've not voted for them because I don't think they were near as good as everybody else thought they were. A little bit too much comedy in their act. But I don't vote in Japan anymore anyway because I've kind of lost the thread. I'm not studied enough on modern Japanese wrestling over the last maybe 10 years. So I abstain from that era, or that territory. But ChatGPT says number 3 is Kojima and Tenzan, multiple-time IWGP and All Japan Tag Team Champions, pillars of early 2000s New Japan, longevity, consistency, and significance in rebuilding New Japan Pro Wrestling, and the post-2000s downturn. Now, just missing out is Yoshirai And look, hey, even our future AI overlords agree with me on this. Still active prime years. So even it says it's ridiculous to be voting for some of these people in the Hall of Fame right now. Let's let it breathe a little. Let the beat build a little bit, And I highly agree. Also, just missing Hayabusa. Says hugely influential, but shorter top run. And the team of Inoki and Sakaguchi, already represented by Inoki's prior induction historically. So ChatGPT kind of lining up against me there in terms of including tag team acts, but we'll have to agree to disagree. In Mexico, you have a 3-person maximum. So that the 3 it chose was Elio Del Santo and Octagon, says huge mainstream stars in the 1990s AAA boom. Santo is a second-generation megastar with cultural permanence. Number 2 is Los Infernales, Satanico, Perito Morgan, and MS1. Define the modern Rudo trio style. Satanico is among Mexico's greatest workers ever. And finally, Sangre Chicana, outstanding draw in Monterrey and Mexico City, legendary brawler with enduring influence. And just missing making their ballot was La Parka, AAA, immensely popular but less consistent top-tier work rate. So very interesting there. We go now to Europe, Australia. I just noticed this. It didn't do the modern. It mentions them in its summary, but it totally skipped over the modern. So we'll go back and look at that in a moment to see, because I don't want to short that deal. Even if look, those of you who think AI or is the end of humanity, the end of the world, is going to take over and destroy everybody, and look, hey, there's evidence to suggest that could be, when even the people building these machines think that could happen too. Hard to argue with people many magnitudes of degrees smarter than I am, but nonetheless, it sure does make a lot of mistakes, that being one of them. So I don't know if that gives me more fear about the future world or just go, hey, it's got a ways to go. I don't know. But anyway, in the the European, Australian, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, Africa group, 4 people maximum. Number 1 of all, this is interesting, Otto Bonds. Says key promoter and heavyweight champion in Europe, drew large gates in Austria and Germany, and legitimate world title credibility. All right, so big check by Otto Vons for ChatGPT. Number 2, Adrian Street, innovator in character and flamboyance, influenced modern presentation of gender performance and persona in wrestling. Number 3, George Gordienko, one of the greatest technical wrestlers Europe produced, respected worldwide. Number 4, Spiros Arion, major star in Australia and Greece, strong historical case, though in his last year of eligibility. Just missing out on their ballot was Ted Boy Marino. It says important in Brazil's scene, but lesser international influence. And then it gave me its 7 choices to be in the non-wrestler section, which I think is going to be very interesting. Let's see what it thinks. See if it has a better or worse grasp of wider popular culture and influence than with the other cases. Number 1, it has is Ted Turner. That would suggest, Ted Turner is probably the person of whom the most information is available about anybody on this ballot. So did that influence? I don't know. But what it says is, without Turner's TNT, TBS investment, WCW in the 1990s wrestling boom would not have occurred. His influence reshaped wrestling on television. So interesting. Number 2, Tony Schiavone, voice of WCW and later AEW. Longevity and major presence through several eras. Number 3, Mike Tenay, intelligent, credible announcer with an encyclopedic knowledge, key in WCW's Cruiserweight Revolution and TNA's early years. So that's a good right up there for Mike Tenay. Number 4, Rossi Ogawa, founder of Stardom, pivotal in the rise of Joshi's modern renaissance. Number 5, Larry Madison, key St. Louis wrestling figure, both booker and historian, preserving one of wrestling's most important markets. Number 6, Jesse Ventura, transformed color commentary and helped bring pro wrestling into pop culture through his crossover fame. And number 7, somebody I will also be voting for. I'm going to try to max out this particular category on my ballot. Reggie Parks, legendary championship belt designer. His work literally defined wrestling's visual identity, and I like the way it said that. I think that's true. Just missing out, Gorilla Monsoon as announcer and executive, though often overshadowed by others already in. And Jim Johnston, huge musical contributor, but niche compared to the broader industry impact. So there we go. It does say, now it did tell me it voted for 6 people in the Modern USA group. So let me scroll back and make sure I just didn't. Oh, I did. We actually talked about that to some degree, I think. Its selections, by the way, for that case I did was CM Punk was number 1. And look, I've got to vote for CM Punk this year. His case just keeps getting stronger and stronger. He was barely a borderline pick. I think he was probably a good pick for a few years now. He's so divisive, so off-putting to so many people. Seems like a miserable person to ever want to be around, but you got to hand it to him, man. I think this is true. CM Punk, tremendous draw in multiple eras. The 2011 WWE boom, AEW's early peak, great promos, and lasting cultural impact. And I think that's certainly that last statement very true. Number 2, they have Edge, Adam Copeland. Longevity, main event consistency, crossover appeal, and excellence as both heel and face. And then there's FTR, Dax Hardwood, Cash Wheeler, one of the best in-ring tag teams in the modern era, excelling across multiple promotions and styles, WWE, AEW, New Japan. Becky Lynch legitimately helped lead a women's wrestling boom in WWE, carried WrestleMania's 35 main event, and strong mainstream visibility. Jon Moxley, AEW's cornerstone star, consistently great worker, versatile, and among the most influential post-WWE success stories. Very true. Then Trish Stratus, central to elevating women's wrestling presence in WWE's key mainstream name and long-term influence. Just missing out, and I love this. I almost cackled with indefinite hilarity here. Just missed out, yes, Randy Orton, borderline even to AI. Longevity and consistency, but not a major business mover, says ChatGPT. Cody Rhodes, it says, is likely a future lock, and again, probably withheld the vote there because still neck deep in his active career. The Briscoes, it's his critical acclaim, but tragedy curtailed broader exposure. And yeah, we never got to see him in WWE, and that's very unfortunate there too. Now, in summary, the ChatGPT said, overall notes, the Hart Foundation, Dusty and Murdoch, and CM Punk would likely be strong contenders for induction this year. So it thinks its prognostication is that going into the Hall of Fame this year will be the Hart Foundation, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, and CM Punk. So we'll have to wait and see. And wait and see if that's like. You can always, if you forget, reference back the article. It will remain up at whenitwascool.com. It'll be probably moved to the wrestling section by then, but you can check it back and see. It also says Becky Lynch and FTR are the most compelling modern era arguments for recent induction. Okay. Manami Toyota and Yoshiaki Fujiwara remain long overdue, if not in yet. And the non-wrestler field is particularly deep. Ted Turner, Rossi Ogawa, and Reggie Parks are historically indispensable. So if you're looking as a criteria for your ballot to be historically indispensable, well, we got to consider Ted Turner, Rossi Ogawa, and Reggie Parks. So very interesting. I'm glad I did that little exercise, and I hope you are too. It gives a little more clarity. Again, that will not be my ballot now. I will do my own ballot and send it in, and I will make those votes public on one of our shows at When It Was Cool, at least, if you don't hear it here also. And I think it's a really good ballot this year. I like the way this ballot looks. I think we've got a few people finally in that have been long overdue. I think this is just, I mean, there's not, to me, a ton of really objectionable entries into this. I mean, I think you can limit the but what ifs to maybe 5 or 6 people in this one. The rest of it, you're just arguing over your interpretation of the criteria. You know, you're just arguing over the minutia of that, and I get it. It's interesting it did not put Bill Goldberg on there, right? That was pretty interesting, and I've long considered Bill Goldberg a stronger candidate than the votes he usually gets. I've been thinking about putting Bill Goldberg on my ballot again. Also, there's been some years I've put him on, some years I've left him off, and this, ChatGPT didn't even consider him. And look, hey, one I've been borderline on forever is CM Punk, and man, that was the AI's number one pick for that category. And again, I was already very, very much on the borderline with 1 foot into, yes, probably deserves it with CM Punk. But look, CM Punk just continues to expand upon his legacy. He's doing big stuff in WWE right now. So, hey, he just, it's time. It's time on CM Punk, at least for me anyway. And for the rest of you, I hope you have enjoyed this show. I hope you've enjoyed this, hopefully unique, something a little different than the usual discussion. Maybe adds another layer to it. And now, let's sit back and watch, send in our votes, and see who actually ends up in the 2025 Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. So this show is free for everybody. It is at WrestlingObserver.com, so you can send anybody who wants to hear the show there. You can also send them to WhenItWasCool.com. The show will be free over there as well. So spread the word about it, and let's try to increase our visibility at WhenItWasCool.com. And we would love to have you as a Patreon supporter. We have a very active and sizable Patreon community where a lot of great discussion takes place. Plus, you get instant access to around 3,000 podcasts dealing not just with pro wrestling history, but with pop culture and retro pop culture as well. We have at least 1 or 2 shows a week that are about pop culture, movies, TV, streaming, comic books, toys, antiques, society. We have a number of stuff. So a couple times a week, you get a little something different as well, and that's always a lot of fun. And thank you all very much. Thank you for your longtime support of this show and for all of our Patreons. Hang on. We're going to go about 20 more minutes or so and discuss some more of this. For everybody else, I'll see you here again soon at WhenItWasCool.com. Hey, everybody. This is Carl Stern from WhenItWasCool.com. I'm here to tell you about my new book, now available, Dragon King Carl's Pioneer Era Pro Wrestling Omnibus, the Bible of the Pioneer Era of professional wrestling. Pro wrestling didn't start with Frank Gotch. He didn't just appear out of the void to bring us entertainment-style professional wrestling. No, it was built on a legacy some 70 to 80 years old. That's what I'm going to talk to you about, an era of wrestling in America seldom ever discussed, never before in this detail. I have put 700 pages of information about the pioneers of professional wrestling, like William Muldoon, Colonel James H. McLaughlin, Professor Theobald Bauer, Clarence Whistler, William Miller, and so many more. Maybe some names you've never heard of before, maybe some you've only heard in passing. I will tell you the origins and evolution. Now available, Amazon.com, WhenItWasCool.com.